So we're sitting here with Hichem Merouche, who is based in Thessaloniki in Greece, from Algiers. We met a couple of times in Sweden. You've been to dinner at my place. We've been to dinner at a mutual friend, Natasha Marie.
Yeah, I still have to invite you to a dinner.
We went to shopping and market. Skärholmen market.
Looking for spices and hummus and
good stuff.
Cheap products.
And you are currently a Jaspis resident.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've been the whole summer basically.
It's my last week of 3 months residency. I came beginning of June, so June, July and August. And I'm going to leave in a week probably.
And have you been working on a specific project during your stay, or is...
I think this time was an invitation by Natasha Marie Lorenz, this professor, to come. We had this wish to do an exhibition together in Stockholm, maybe, and this idea came she knew about Jaspis, and she said, "What do you think if you do a residency here?" And for me, that has, in my work, it has sit perfectly in a period of time where I needed to think about personal things that followed my previous work, which was mostly about moving away, let's say, or dislocation from Algeria, and how do the experience of migration and also in a broader sense, and this time was after 2 years of living in a new place, in a new society, and for me it was really a good time to start thinking about maybe the causes and consequences of departure, and also what do we hold on to once we move away, what are the losses that departure causes, and also what maybe the absence that you also trigger, and also how do you relate to the new environment.
So in a way, to reflect on the big shift from Algiers to Thessaloniki, you needed a second, or this other kind of temporal departure, or
it might be something that followed, maybe not necessarily chronologically, on a chronological order, but I think it is to reflect about what happened, and but also to reflect on the intensity that things that were totally overlooked in the environment you grew up in. And I think the fact to physically and mentally dislocate from a place suddenly makes a lot of stuff, a lot of things in life somehow pop out, and like you notice them once you are away from them, you know, and I'm thinking about that.
So I mean, one of these basic first question is what made you make this first departure and establish a new life in Thessaloniki?
I think I would never come up with a reasonable answer to that question. Because there's like a what, there's like a how and a why involved, and they all entangled. But I think it maybe it started with a feeling of wanting to experience something new, or a feeling maybe to be locked somewhere. And I think no one wants to be locked somewhere, even in the places we cherish the most. But also, I think if you would say much more, both pragmatical but not totally pragmatical reasons, it was for a love story.
Love, yes. Yeah.
So my partner is from Thessaloniki, and I think that's a good reason to move.
Yeah, love is always...
you could think about it artistically later, but to have enough motivation to do all that it needs, like in terms of paperwork and in terms of yeah, also in terms of what that causes later on. Like, I mean, it's not, I don't think you realize the moment you move away, but yeah, I think there is like many worse conditions of moving away than the one I did, so it's still quite a privilege also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you return in your mind from these other locations, what is it that sort of occupies your mind?
You know, that's the question that I had yesterday with someone very dear to me that I met here in the Occupy campus for Palestine. And we were talking because he also moved from his home place, and he had a much worse experience, of course, than mine. He crossed the Mediterranean, and we were asking each other actually this question of what do you hold on to when you move away?
Yeah.
And since he had much more experience, he's in Sweden since like 7 years.
Yeah.
He said, you know what? In the beginning, I had a big nostalgia for a lot of stuff, but then I realized that it started fading away. And he said, like, maybe now if I have to think about something that I'm holding on to, it's the language. And then he returned back the question to me, and he said, like, but you, what do you think you're holding on to? And I couldn't give a proper answer, but it was like maybe my mother's recipes because I spent 4 hours in the kitchen every day.
Yeah.
And then I said, like, oh my God, yeah, like food has become a way of getting rooted somewhere, and you know?
A way to feel at home.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you reconstruct homes through the smells, but also through doing something very, how do you call it? Through something very mechanical and repetitive on an everyday basis, but doing something very elementary. You know, like it's like food first, and then we see. You know, it's not like
subsistence.
Yeah,
is
like
the
something of
precondition
subsistence, something of an elementary necessity, but. Yeah.
Do you also need to sort of call your mom to check with the recipes, or are they all very ingrained in your mind?
I think I never called her for a recipe because I'm afraid to see the lag that has occurred between my recipe and her original recipe. So yeah, we mostly talk about, we don't call that much, but we talk about something else. Now we started talking lately. I think actually now we started tricking each other into talking more than what we are, because now we started conversing about a plant that I discovered in Algeria, and it's a plant that is related to a personal history of the family, and I was like, yeah, let me just blindly involve my mom, so we have much more reasons to talk about. You know, like art became this thing at stake, you know, for me. So I'm gonna hand it to my mom so that she has something at stake.
So could you tell us more about the plant? Which kind of plant is it?
Yeah, just before coming to Jaspis in May, I went for a visit to my hometown, which is Annaba. It's 600 kilometers away from Algiers, and it was in a very emotional moment. I went to the neighborhood I grew up in and where I went to school. And I just kept walking there, like, and seeing what can I recognize, and also what did change in that neighborhood. And I noticed that there was a lot of fences, that like suddenly things got super fenced as a way of maybe like creating borders. So like the mosque got fenced, the stadium of the neighborhood got fenced.
Like with brick walls?
Yeah,
or
no,
with,
maybe just wires and
wire
stuff.
fence.
Yeah, and it was very interesting for me. Like, stuff got delimited, and now you have micro territories in the middle of territories, which maybe I wouldn't see it necessarily as like to prevent people to go in, but maybe as like a form of invoking care, that like, you know, this place shouldn't be, it's not an abandoned place, it's fenced, so you should care for it. I think that was the message, trying people to
Who introduced the fences?
I think it was just like the neighborhood people
okay.
trying to do this stuff. And then I kept going up to my elementary school, and I hear like a lot of kids screaming out loud. It was 11:30 in the morning, and I was like, oh my God, what is that? And I realized that it was the last hour of school. But also, just before coming to the entrance of the school, I just like been met by hundreds of kids like coming, like screaming out loud, and they were like tearing their books apart and tearing. And then I realized this was the last day of school, or the last hour of school, and this kid has for me this crazy expression of like, this is our message, this is our final message to the school system.
Yeah, to refuse.
Yeah, it was a huge expression of, and I kept going up that hill, fully in how do you call it? Fully in. Almost crying, because I had all of these meetings there that were so strong, and I just happened to go in the cemetery, and I knew that my grandma was buried there, but I couldn't find her grave, and I had to call my mom, and again, and she was like, okay, we made a video call with my mom, and we kept going through the cemetery, and she knew every person who was buried there. And I was like, oh my God. She was like, okay, turn left at this family, turn right at this family. There's a tree there. I was like, okay. Like, then you realize your absence, on an everyday basis.
That she has another
like you kind of have a sense of measurement of how far you are. And
when you know the dead, you also really know the community.
And once I arrived to the tomb, there was a plant coming out from the grave, and I was like, who planted? What is this plant, and who put it there, and why this plant, and how much of my grandma is in this plant, and what does this plant represent in terms of storytelling in the family? And then I came here with this in mind. I was like, this plant for me embedded something at one side. It's like it's like a life species.
Yeah.
So there was this question of the ability of a live organism to tell stories also, and without human agency, or with very little human agency. And that's what I was reflecting on here.
So the plant had rooted itself basically on the grave.
It's been there for literally. Actually, when I called my mom that day, she was like, "Did you know that today is your grandma's death anniversary?" And I was like, "Oh my God, no."
Wow, what a coincidence.
No, I was like, okay, because I mean, I believe in these things, I'm like, okay, I had to be there that day, and I had to experience these things. So this is when I'm gonna work out. I need to keep the faith in these things. And I've been reading around it, and I finally knew who planted this. Was one of her sons.
Oh.
My grandma had 8 sons and daughters, and literally this plant has been there for years. Like literally from the moment they planted it there, so it never died. It just kept growing, and they kept cutting it, and it never. And
Is there a particular reason why he chose that plant? Does it have?
That's part of my research. It's a plant that is very linked in my home place, and also in Tunisia, where I'm born, into ceremonial processions. It could be they also extract a certain water from it. It's linked to celebrations, to mourning, so it's somehow a semi-ritualistic plant, And it has a great smell. Maybe it was thought of as something important to be put there by the person who put it there. Yeah, but what's interesting is because a lot of the sons and daughters of my grandma were living in her house, or at least were gravitating around this house that I grew up in. And then you have this other side story of second generation Algerian families who. Or maybe at the third generation, they cannot sustain these ex-colonial houses they have inhabited, and when the grandma dies, of course, the house gets sold, you know, and I think this story is like very common in where I come from.
Yeah.
And it was some kind of transfer, you know, happened between the grave and the house. Like, so now like the sounds are a bit orbiting around the grave. Like that's where the weekly meeting point became.
Like the home, the new home, could you say that, or no?
I think for sure there's a lot of grief.
Yeah.
But I think they were holding on to something that brings them together, because of course there was a lot of problems, of course, with selling the house. There is, you know, as every classic story maybe of, you know, like children of a person, you know, these questions of heritage and also what is heritage, and I see heritage in this plant also for me, but also I see it as I'm still thinking about its ability to I mean, of course, the plant is just topping the tomb, because the tomb is important, is to go there, and like they go there, they pray, maybe they meet there. They don't meet necessarily that much as they were before, but so I keep thinking a lot about that space. Yeah.
Do you have the plant here? Is that part of your research to kind of reactivate its abilities? As kind of.
That's one thing, one power I gave to my mom was she's now propagating that plant.
Okay.
Yeah, because in the beginning she was like, why do you have interest in that plant? And I'm like, oh my God, like how do we engage in this conversation? But then necessarily we started talking together, and of course it was very emotional. Yeah. You know, because you talk about, I think for my mom it's very difficult because it's a question of two disappearances somehow. Like this mom that actually passed away and this son who have moved away, and
so it becomes a recollection of your future in a way.
Somehow.
Or your fear about a specific scenario in the future.
Somehow, maybe. And she's in between these two departures. And yeah.
A way to process the fear, at least, or.
Yeah. I think I never thought about disappearance as much as the moment I left, but not like my own death, but more like maybe like where do you come to an end, you know? Yeah, or like be far away from people. You don't realize that necessarily in the beginning, but
do you think in those terms? I mean, maybe this becomes a bit too morbid, but do you think about the terms in terms of where you would die? I mean, would dying in Thessaloniki be an option for you?
Wow, that's too early. I hope that's too early.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. No, but I'm not thinking necessarily, again, I'm not thinking about my own death. I'm just thinking about the idea to, you know, grounding.
Yeah.
Like notions of grounding, and but also these sacred spaces, you know, because maybe my mom believes much more than me this idea of where do you die and the importance of that. Maybe because she's much more religious than I am, or and yeah. For the moment, I think we're just taking care of this plant because it became something much more than it actually was for us. It's like, yeah, it's our bond now. Beside having factual conversations. And we're gonna see where that leads, but yeah, for now the plant is in her house. I mean, one like she propagated it, so she keeps sending me pictures of how it grows.
And you were working with film and installations, also publications. How is this? Do you have an idea of how to work with this project, this research, that you're currently engaged with, or is that something for the future, or?
Well, this time it started with objects and with live species like plants, and also while being here, there was a newborn in our family, so not just, you know, every.
Yeah.
Which is maybe puts us on the other spectrum of emotions, and I mean, I wasn't there also, so that's also something else you miss, you know, not. But we were talking on the phone, and again, so this phone has become something very important. And yeah, right now it's there's like a series of objects involved with a lot of events that you don't necessarily physically experience live there, but you kind of think about them. And for now, I'm just
collecting
them. I mean, yeah, and thinking about them, reading around them, writing around them. So, yeah.
Somehow it makes me think a lot about Ariella Isha Sulai, who speaks a lot about her relationship to the kind of artifacts in her house. I don't know if you remember or have read this potential history, for example, in the preface. She's reflecting on the fact that in her house she's surrounded with these memorabilia and artifacts, but none of them tell the story of her background or her heritage, really, and how important the kind of object is to maintain memory. Maybe more than the picture or the image in a certain sense, although the image has a lot of potency and is very strong in its message and what it collects, and of course is an object also. I don't know, it's just a reflection.
I'm actually reading that book right now. For other, like on thinking about other things. More about, you know, like classical, like what's the history of a museum, and where does the notion of the gallery comes from, but like on a colonial kind of perspective, and But I think that's somehow related to what I'm doing here. It's you know, it's about connections and but also notions of what is sacred for once and what is not necessarily sacred for the other one, and the nature of the artworks themselves, like, you know, and also the definitions of the artworks themselves, and how maybe in other societies we wouldn't even have the title artwork to something or to an experience, and you know, like and also the question of the non-displayability of everything, and the non-collectability of everything, and the different kind of access we have to different things according to cultural backgrounds, and that's maybe more what I'm focusing on right now, reading this book, Potential History. But there is one point there which I think is very interesting, but also challenging to think in terms of art, as making art, which is her point on how images from the first Nakba and the forced displacement of Palestinians taken by the Red Cross, in how they have been archived, and the kind of subtext to these images totally destroys the narrative and the history and the background and the relationality that is inherent in the persons that are part of the image, right? So representations have these problems, and compared to original objects that are collected, they also have an inherent relationality, which is of course displaced, silenced, or disconnected. So what happens when you as an artist sort of maybe not collect but focus on an object? How does relationality in your case, in your artwork, work? How do you sort of relate yourself to the objects that you are now working with, but also how do you think about placing or displacing objects as an artist? Yeah, that's most probably my concern when I was thinking about these objects that I happened to notice them, their presence and their importance. In echoing the reading of this book, that's exactly what I was thinking about. Is like, what do I want to do necessarily with that, or what do they occupy as place? But for me, I think I appropriate them as storytelling devices, you know. And also I'm thinking a lot about maybe later on, like I'm thinking about the exhibition space as a place to tell story rather than to bring objects to get them, you know, put them there for display, but maybe as a space that echoes things that happens outside, and you know, I'm also thinking of how to interact and provoke certain happenings in terms of art practice that necessarily don't end up in an object that has his limits of like an in and out, that like you define its borders, but more of something that really echoes the for example, a plant, or that is really that, like, you know, it's made of organic, it's alive, it has its own system of attention and response to its environment, and so I'm trying to be very careful of but also like I almost like cannot avoid contamination in this project, you know, because it's never like it's never that like you have zero interaction with these organisms, you know. You're always going to contaminate them back, and they contaminate you. So
back and forth.
Yeah.
Which is also, I think, more fair. I think one of the issues that might be kind of recurring in trying to deal with, for example, the colonial approach to art is that you try to clean up, even if it's deconstructing the white cube or dealing with the notion of art, the notion of the artist or autonomy. The biggest failures are the ones that are also not recognizing whatever problem that you might reproduce, right? In your whatever choice and whatever gesture you choose to sort of pursue.
It could be paralyzing.
So I'm just very curious, because I've faced the challenge myself. Maybe it's not a challenge for you, but how you relate to yourself, basically, through your family when working.
You know, I think for me there was no proper, like, I didn't sit down and say, what are the ethical questions of working with my parents or with anyone else. I think if there is care and attention and love installed, so necessarily the interaction is going to be something hopefully free of any ethical problems, you know, or like, you know, or like using someone for, it's not about that, but because I'm also telling my story, you know, like through this thing, and until now there's nothing really, we don't even know where this is going to end. So we just started watering a plant together, you know. This plant has a lot of importance for both of us, and it signifies a lot for us, you know. I think we're just starting to give ourselves strong connections beyond Mediterranean, you know. So for me, that's how I understand it, you know.
Maybe I'm just envious. Maybe I'm like, shit, I should do something with my mom.
No, but also maybe it doesn't work if it's like that, because I didn't come and say, oh, I want to do something with my parents.
No,
I mean?
But maybe being there in that situation where you have a conversation about something meaningful with your mom. I mean, not saying that I don't have conversations that are meaningful, but it sounds beautiful. I'm not.
But you know, it's also. I felt like for me, it's also a revolt against this idea of like, what do you do? Because my parents never understood what I do.
Okay.
You know, I was this kid very destined to become like I studied physics. Then I dropped school to become a photographer. So until today, okay, like he's somewhere. Yeah, it seems very interesting, you know, like you're not whatever cousin that is like a failure, how they judge it. You know, you're somewhere doing stuff, but like they don't know what I do. It's so abstract for them, and also I think it's beautiful if we manage to do something even with this abstraction existing of what do you actually do. You know, because I think there's stuff that you feel and you don't explain as like a project. How do you call it? Like feuille de route. Like it's not a work plan. It's just it's just attention. I think it has to do with knowledge of intention a lot.
And also, I hear you say that it's also very difficult as an artist to explain to others what you actually do.
Yeah.
And when there is this benevolent confusion from you, which I can also recognize more from relatives, it is also a very nice way to present yourself by talking or by doing something together, I guess. Without any necessarily end point in mind, but just doing it, you know, being.
Because the story never ends.
Yeah.
I think the story is beyond us. You know, it was here before us and it's beyond us, and maybe it's a form of stating this relativity that we live in, every one of us, and we grab the story from our perspective, and we. I think it's just our own illusion, which is for me very true to the story. And I think for me, I had to look back to those things. I felt like these are the things. Once I left and spent like 2 years abroad, I had to look back to these things because maybe these are the strongest memories I had there, and these spaces at least, like of childhood, and how strong they felt now. While it was maybe some years ago they would have been overlooked. It was okay, it would be like just a visit to this neighborhood, but it wouldn't provoke that much. You know, maybe it's fear of disappearance, I don't know.
So now we started off talking about how your residency in Stockholm has enabled you to reflect of these movements, 2 movements that you've done, or main movement. And what do you think this kind of intermission, I guess, that Stockholm maybe represents in your life, what do you think
it's really calm here.
It's calm.
It's super calm here.
So will you come back?
But also it's super green, so you know, it's kind of distracting when you're working on one plant and you come here and everything is green, you know, it's like, oh my God, like what am I gonna do? No, but I think it was a really, again, people makes the difference, no? It's like for me, I had the chance to know people before coming here and then get the right connection, have lovely conversation. I mean, like the one we have now. So for me, it was more about like conversing around these experiences and also like understanding what's the practice of a lot of artists here and getting familiar with the scene, if we could, even if I had this word. But,
And when you're ending this week, so you're moving back to Thessaloniki?
Thessaloniki next week, yes. I'm so craving to go to swim. Because people keep telling me like, you have to swim. This is for me, my understanding. My understanding of water is so different. Especially the temperature in the water. Of course. Also the color, everything. Like water. I mean, I've been around water all the time, but my definition of swimming is just the Mediterranean. I mean, that's how narrow it is. So I have very little tolerance to swimming. It needs to be a specific space in the world.
And I would love to come visit you.
Please, I mean, I already invited you twice.
Twice. This is third time. So now, third time you have to come.
We need to come.
Okay.
You're gonna love it there.
Yes.
It's much warmer. And
I know. I was in Italy now with my family, and it's, you know.
But look at this.
I repair every time I go there. It's like reparation.
You repair from this?